Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. A for the first time in a very long time, actually, on my own, well, this shared channel. Really, if it's my own, let's be honest, we all know who the Mini Ninjas is. Just a quick reminder for those that aren't familiar, yes, I actually do pixel artwork, quite a bit actually, although I normally don't get the chance to record too much of it, but in this case, let's make an exception. Now, what's going to be going on here for what's probably going to be a video or two of my usual sped up video, unless someone's really inclined on seeing me work on a single animation for, with the exception of a slightly lost video due to technical issues, over 2 hours of me working on a single animation. We're going to show up a sped up version of this animation, which basically is a CPS3 inspired remake of Demitri. Although I say remake kind of loosely because the way this particular animation worked is the original frame, which was just a single frame based on the general CPS3 look that you see on the right, was made by an artist by the name of eFex. Now, going on there based on that appearance, but generally drawing his own series of line work, although it's pretty clearly heavily inspired on the original eFex based image, Inkterebuchet, which is a fellow who happens to do some stuff and wants to do a whole complete set of this, but I'll have to make a link to his DeviantArt page later as well. Decided to do or draw up an initial line work version of the animation and slightly start coloring in, taking a few bits and pieces. As you can see, the head and feet are clearly borrowed from the FX frame, and he was starting in order to flesh it out there, which is for the most part where this image ended up starting off from. Unfortunately, as you might have noticed earlier on, the line work on certain parts were a bit shakier. Generally, I think part of the issue that was going on here was that, actually, let me drop an example. Alright, now pull up something from one of Capcom's own kind of Japanese-only books there. The initial line work for all the Darkstalker stuff and most of their original animation work in general is actually pretty simplistic for the most part, and to my understanding, they generally flesh the thing out more once it's digitized and kind of working on their computer setups. Well, on the other hand here, what Ink did is he basically worked out all the major landmarks and lines ahead of time, which, although if it was working on basically like a single frame or something that was really stiff, it wouldn't have mattered too much, I imagine. But because of all the movement that was going on here, there are a bunch of cases where the muscles and kind of major landmarks ended up shifting a bit too much with the line work. So that's what you probably see me at this point of the video and a little bit earlier. I'm basically going in there and trying to fix all the major line works. At this point, the more visible shoulder as well as the chest has been adjusted. I've added in some more indentations of the ribcage closer based on what was done in the original FX image. And slowly but surely I'm fixing things like around the elbows and the tricep area right now at this point of the video, I believe, in order to kind of get things a bit more stable, so to speak, with the line work. Generally, the issue is while he does have basically everything fairly well represented, it's just a matter of things being a little shaky compared to what they probably should be at this point, since honestly Demitri wasn't moving as much at this point, or in the idle animation here, in order to justify all of the things that were kind of bouncing around there. I understand at this point, especially when I grabbed it, it is still really preliminary in the animation, but it's better to try to keep all that stuff, especially on since realistically the suit he's wearing is a disguise for the most part. It's not an actual suit, otherwise it'd be really impossible to have it that skin tight where everything would be popping out without having something going wrong. But that's more Darkstalker's lore than we're going to be getting into at this point. So generally, yes, I'm just kind of fixing up the bicep tricep area right now, trying to clean it up so it's a little more consistent all around, especially around the elbows, which kind of appear and disappear at this point in the animation still. One of the other things I did earlier on was I changed the collar so it had a more consistent look, since it was also kind of the collar that holds the cape in place, which is something which will get drawn on a separate layer, along with the aura, which will be receiving a third layer of its own, but that's jumping the gun, we're not that part yet. Alright, on the screen in a second, after I do a few more small touches, I'm actually going to make it so that the extreme end of the animation, or at the more relaxed point, the arms will kind of relax a little bit outward. So that's what's going to be going on in a second while you see me pulling the arms out. But yeah, in terms of the original animation for Demitri, based on the at this point really old CPS2 animation work, most of his frames, which is basically give or take a 24 frame idle animation, are actually cheap frames of sort in order to make the aura itself more fluid, so to speak, with Demitri not really moving too much on his own. Realistically, if you actually look at, even the cape is fairly limited in movement once you really look at it on its own merits and not just pay attention to what's going on with the aura, which is basically there really to occupy everyone's attention, to be honest. So at this point, like I said, I'm doing a bit more of a relaxed animation and kind of testing out how it look like, maybe have his shoulders sink a little bit more at this point, and I'm realistically also going to have the hands push a little bit further outward on both sides just to give it a little more movement, because otherwise it's just kind of shuffling within maybe 2-3 frames back and forth tops. And even for this animation, how little Demitri actually moves, that really is too little, especially when it's being moved up to CPS3 standards, which does have more movement. So yeah, we definitely have to bump that up a bit. In this case, since normally if I were doing this on my own animations, I'd have everything broken up as usual in a foreground, middle ground, and background setting, so that I'd be able to basically move the more visible arms, which should be done in the foreground on their own there, and the background I'd be able to just drag that back in and out of place as I need to. But since everything here is from a single kind of standard GIF, or just flattened out GIF, I have to manually pick the things and then redraw what's underneath there, making sure they refer back and forth, that I'm not accidentally drawing something that doesn't belong there. Let's see, at this point, okay, now at this moment I'm actually adjusting the details in the hands to add a few more shades back in and just kind of fix the finger detail. The backhand, which for the most part looks like it's more based off eFex works as well, although it's probably hand drawn in there as well, is actually more or less alright. It's just a matter of fixing the shading on the backhand, which I really should say is artist right on this side. So that one is just a matter of fixing the shading that goes on, but for the artist left hand, that one needs more detail added in, and in this case I also want to add in an extra shade of color in there. The first two of the frames there are kind of the early frames where the hands are in one direction. Those are easy enough to work in. They're actually close enough to the original that I can basically just kind of look and eyeball and recreate it easily. From there on out, the hands do twist inward a bit. So obviously you have to adjust the location of the knuckles and all the other major landmarks and general line work in there. And of course adjust the shading to kind of accompany that extra movement there. The only bright side I say about working with Capcom stuff in this case is because they tend to draw the hands and feet so large, you have that extra room in order to work in there. If you're trying to do something where the hands, or realistically the extremities, were more easily proportioned or more realistically proportioned, like the Capcom versus SNK stuff, it would actually be more irritating just because you have less visual space to work with. If you're ever wondering why I don't do a lot of Capcom versus SNK based stuff, that's why. It gives too little to work with, and if you're trying to do something complicated, you either have to be really careful, and it takes a lot of times to get it just right, or it's going to look like crap, I'm going to be honest. And while there are a lot of people who, or at least quite a few people I know, who can manage to pull that thing right off and make it work, I honestly can't say I'm one of them. Most of the times I feel the hands are generally crap when trying to work on those styles, just because I feel I'm trying to add too much detail in an area that can't fit that detail. And even here I have to make sure I don't go too far into detail, even though I do have more space to work with it, just because once you start making it too visually busy, you screw it up. It becomes fairly obvious that there's too much going on here. Alright, as for what's going on right now, I'm now starting to add in some more of the kind of fringe body details, maybe the buckles down the side of the implied pants, vest. I don't know what's going on with Dimitri's clothes, because they're not really clothes like I mentioned before. It's weird that way. But at this point, I'm fairly happy with the direction the hands are going. So we'll leave that alone there. I'm just making sure the buckles based on the placement off the original eFex frame are fairly alright, and they're moving decently enough for the animation. And basically, at this point, I was working a bit around basically his round his crotch and to fix some line work there, and now I'm working a little more around his waist in order to fix some of the generally implied line work for the vest that really isn't a vest, or jacket edges. It's confusing working with this guy when you know it's not real clothes, because everything is so damn form-fitting, and it doesn't make any damn sense. No, crap. Actually, this looks like a good time for a break, so I'll catch you all next time on part 2 of this setup.